This is 1981 and it's the GL1100. It's the second generation of the Honda Goldwing. The first one, of course, was the GL1000. This one is the GL1100. The next one is the GL1200. What I like about this one is that it came in two trims, the naked version and the interstate. I had the interstate, and you can watch the video in the corner where I have it in interstate form. Now, I removed everything from it. I prefer this. The Honda Goldwing looks really good as a naked bike. This is a beautiful bike. Everything about this bike works really well. Even the color just looks amazing. These bikes, you can find them all over the internet for sale for about $1,000. It's going to be difficult finding one that's in great shape, but often when you take a gamble on these bikes, you'll be pleasantly surprised. If the engine and transmission on these bikes is good, you're pretty much golden. The frame on it lasts a long time. You can modify them very easily, as I did. I added some mods, and I'm going to show you in this video what I did to get this bike to this point. Cases. This bike has got two of them, and it also comes with a goofy top box that I don't particularly like using. It's a top loading box, and notice here, interstate. It's got a reflector. It's also got the blinker built in, and it's got two latches that are keyed. So you can do this, open it up, and you do have to keep this around. They don't flip up like most modern ones on a hinge. And I like that they're very lightweight. Most of this bike is heavy, but for some reason, Honda made this extremely lightweight and durable plastic. You have to get some screws, unbolt two bolts, and then two on the floor that attach to the frame, and then this pops out. So it's not an easy conversion. Most modern bikes have some sort of latching mechanism that lets you just pull it out and take it inside a hotel room. Not in 1981. It's something that's incredible. It's this engine. Unlike modern Goldwings, this is a 4-cylinder. The GL1000, GL1100 were 4 cylinders, and then later they built, of course, that silky smooth 6-cylinder bike. But there's something about this engine that I really love. It has a certain rawness to it, but also it's incredibly smooth. Even though it's a smooth bike, you still have a little bit more mechanical noise, and it just feels much nicer to ride. The heads are here, and 2 cylinders per side, and then up here, of course, you have the carburetors. Most of these bikes that have been sitting a long time are going to have issues with the carburetor. So if you get one of these, make sure that the carbs are nice and clean and you don't have problems. When you get an old bike like this, it also means that every single part for it is going to be expensive. Like these manifolds are very expensive. If you damage these, you're going to have to search around for these on eBay. And the carburetors, of course, are very complex. Another really amazing thing about this bike is that it's got crash bars built in, so the cylinders are protected. The way they built these crash bars back in the day, they don't really attach that well to the frame. They're actually like these C-clamps. Even the interstate fairing was attached to the frame via like these C-clamps. This particular bike has got something very unique, a 19-inch front wheel. That's the exact same wheel size that you would have on a BMW GS. And it is tubeless. If you get the GL1000, you're going to get tubes in the tires. So this is the first one. This was a technology advancement for the Goldwing, having tubeless tires. The spokes on them, very interesting. They're like these sections, and they're bolted in with bolts. It's not like it's a cast wheel. Very interesting. And the front brakes, you have dual discs up front. They're solid. They're not like with the holes to save weight and keep the heat off. Also, another interesting thing is that the forks themselves are very unique, along with the rear suspension. They have air in the system like many of these bikes back in the day. Depending on if you had a passenger or added weight, you could modify the air suspension. And one pot caliper on each side. Now that is one of the issues with this bike, is that the braking is not great on it. This seat is 40 years old and is incredibly comfortable. And just look at the condition of it. There's nothing destroyed. This seat, of course, like this was a touring bike, so it had to hold up. But I'm very surprised that even with the age of this bike and the many owners that it has, no rips, no tears, nothing. This is the original seat, by the way. It's not a seat that was modified. It's got this lumbar support, so it's not very sporty looking, but it's incredibly comfortable. The GL1100 was introduced in 1980. This one is in 1981, and it features a 1085cc engine, 4 cylinders, and horizontally opposed layout. GL1100 was known for its touring capabilities, comfortable riding experience, and advanced features for its time, such as the full fairing and a liquid-cooled engine. It played a significant role in establishing the Goldwing's reputation as a popular choice among touring enthusiasts. So the competition for the GL1100 was the R100 RT, it was the Kawasaki KZ1300 Voyager, and the Yamaha Venture. So what makes the GL1100 better than the competitors? Well, it had the smooth 4-cylinder engine, and the smoothness and power from this engine provided comfort and a responsive ride. The seating position on this bike is very comfortable, but one thing that I realized was very different was your legs, your feet are right behind the cylinder. And in the summertime, you do feel that heat. Right now it's pretty cold and it feels great to have some heat on your feet. This bike is not perfect, so one of the issues that I have currently is that it's leaking from the valve covers here. So I'm going to have to fix that. What that means is that my shoes usually get covered with a little bit of oil, but it's not really much to lose any oil. The oil is actually perfect on the bike. But it's just one of those things, you have to search out for those gaskets yourself. It's not like the dealer might have them, but in some cases they might be able to order them for you. But the position of this bike is very neutral, but it's at the same time, because of these handlebars that I put on, it tends to be a little bit more aggressive, which I like. This bike was not really meant to be a sporty bike. The fork rake is kind of long because it is a touring bike. So with these handlebars, it feels sportier, but it's one of these things that you have to be very careful because you could possibly override its tires and suspension and everything. Back in the day, Honda was not really trying to make a sporty Goldwing. What they were trying to do was create a touring bike, more touring and cruiser. The GL1800s are much sportier. When you ride one of those, they handle extremely well. But on this one, it's a little bit more of a leisure ride, a little bit more touring oriented as far as the geometry. But I love the way it sits, and I love the way the handlebars feel. It's just, you have to realize that it's not really a fast sport bike. Even though the weight on this bike is extremely low, as far as low center of gravity, it is a heavy bike. It's almost like 600 pounds. When you compare it to the Honda ST1300, for example, the ST1300 weighs more, but it feels much lighter than this. Now, this headlight might not be everybody's taste, but I wanted to get a HID or LED light, but this particular one has turn signals built in, so I didn't have to worry about getting additional turn signals and getting it to fit on the bike. So that's right, when I removed the interstate plastic, I lost that big headlight, which was glass. This, of course, is plastic. It's one of the cheap Chinese stuff, but it works pretty well, and it's so bright that you can see the light on the roadway during daytime. Goldwing has got 2 exhausts, and they're symmetrical, and they're tiny. When you compare this to any modern bike, including a Yamaha T-Max scooter. The exhaust on those things have gotten enormous. But you know, back in the day, they didn't have all of these regulations for emissions. So this particular bike has got tiny little exhausts, and the exhausts actually sound good. One of the particular things that I love about motorcycles, especially if you're going to keep them for a while, is having a shaft drive. This one, the shaft drive is on the right side, very much like the SD1100s and SD1300s. It's that on this exhaust, there's nothing on it. It's like completely straight. But let's go to the other side. Molded this little dimple into the left side exhaust because when you bring up the center stand, that little recession will go there. It's brilliant. Even though this is something that's not appreciated by a lot of people, when I see this about this bike, I do think that they spent a whole lot of research time on this, and they did. They came from Japan, they went into Sturgis, they asked everybody what they wanted in a bike, and this is the culmination, the Honda Goldwing GL1100, and of course this one is an improvement of the 1000. The weight of Hondas generally tends to be high, but the way they engineer Hondas is that they decide to keep the weight low. So good to ride, it's because the weight is down low where it belongs. On this particular bike, you might be wondering, oh, this is the gas tank. Nope, that's not the gas tank. The gas tank is right here, and it's not that big of a gas tank. I was expecting to get at least 200 miles range, but I get about 150 before I have to fill up. And because it is a heavy bike, it's not that fuel efficient. But these are only like small little things. Gas tank is here, the battery is on the other side down. You're actually sitting above all the weight. The gas tank here, this comes out and there's nothing in here. It's just your fuses, your coolant, your air box, and of course you have your gas cap that feeds to the gas tank. This is an antenna because the interstate version came with a radio, and this is solid chrome. Just look at the size of this rear tail light. It is humongous, and I like that about bikes. I don't need like a little tiny brake light. I want to be seen. This will let you be seen. This cargo rack is super strong. This thing is just so solid. When I was removing various metals from this bike to convert it to the naked version, I was surprised by the heaviness of the metal. Everything that they used was very expensive metal. Same thing with this rack. I love it. It's so useful, and of course it does have quick release for the top box. The top box, I'll show you to you in a minute. It's so useful, and it's the same tradition with the new Goldwings. The new Goldwings have this really large top box that fits 2 full-size helmets. Same thing with this. That's one of the really nice things about the Honda Goldwing, but unfortunately I hate the way it looks. Top boxes on bikes just do not look great. Let me show you what's underneath here. First, you have a really nice logo here. You have the labels that were never removed, which is remember, always wear your helmet, ride safely, read owner's manual. Then you have it in French and German. So your key goes here, this pops out, and there's no gas tank here, but you do have the filler that feeds to the lower gas tank. And then you have your air box, and then here you have your coolant bottle, and then you have your fuses. And on this side, you have a bunch of relays where you can reach it. It's you know, it is a tight fit, but you can still reach it. So this had a lot of home mechanics in mind when they did this. When you compare it to the Yamaha T-Max project I did, this is so much easier to work on than a Yamaha T-Max, and I appreciate it. There's like no plastics on it to impede the way the bike looks. One thing I am missing is a tray in this faux tank. Normally it comes with a tray that goes right in here, and I don't have that. The left side, you have new grips, you have your headlights. The low beams turn on automatically, but you have high beams. And then you have your turn signals. These are old school turn signals. Left, middle to cancel, and then right. They're kind of annoying, a little bit difficult to use, especially on this bike's plastic. And then you have the horn, which is a yellow round button. And I installed this. This is a fan switch that overrides the radiator fan, because the switches on these old bikes, they go bad. So this is the solution that a lot of people use. They'll just put an on-off switch to manually control the fan. Another thing that surprised me is that the clutch cable, it's a clutch cable. It's not hydraulic. And because I changed the handlebars, the cables on the clutch and brakes were too long. So I do have to order new cables everywhere. This right side, of course, you have the throttle and brakes. The brakes do need some work. And this bike speed is pretty low that you don't need crazy brakes, but it does help to change the brake lines to braided steel lines. You have your kill switch, and then you have your starter, master cylinder, and then these tiny mirrors. Now, one of the best things I could have done for this bike was install these handlebars. These handlebars make it so much nicer to ride. And when you have something like this, it just gives you a much sportier position. There's also a choke here, but because of the way the handlebars are, it kind of hides it. And also, it goes down by itself. You pull it up, you start the bike, and it automatically just goes down. Today, in the 80s, bikes apparently were limited to 85 miles an hour. I believe they can go faster. I haven't tried it because I didn't get this bike to be super fast. On the other side, you have a tachometer, and it tachs out at 8.5 thousand. And you have a coolant temperature, then you have your fuel, the fuel gauge on the right, and then you have a bunch of dummy lights like the turns, the high beam, the neutral, and the engine, and of course your key for ignition. And then you have a way of resetting your trip. Right here, you just twist this and reset your trip. In this cover, you don't even need screws to get it out. You can just pull it out because of these rivets. There's your battery. Very easy to access. The center stand is very easy to put on. Put it right in the middle, step on it, and just kind of put all your weight on it, lean back, and it goes on rather quickly. Now, one thing that I found, because the shocks on this went bad, and they were the air shocks, so I just decided to get regular ones, and they were $100 a piece, and you do lose the air ride suspension. One thing I noticed is that with the regular air suspension, the kickstand, it's like so far down. Like when you push it on the kickstand, it almost feels like the bike wants to fall over. More so with the stock suspension than this one, because it's a little bit higher. So when you sit on it, I can flat foot it. I told you, with the top box, it just looks so much goofier. But I do appreciate the ease of use. This is the only quick release thing about this particular bike. And it's massive, but it does look goofy. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed this view into my 1981 Honda Goldwing. These can be bought for hardly any money online. So hit that like, make sure you hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, it is time to take this bike for a ride and see how she rides. The thing that you have to realize is that there's two positions to the key. That's accessories on, and then that is off, and you see the neutrals on. Push the starter, and she is warm, so she'll come to life really easy, but she's very easy to start. One of the things to keep in mind with these old GL1000s, 1100s, if they sit on the center stand or the side stand for very long, there's smoke that could happen because the oil goes into the left cylinder. I usually keep mine on the center stand. But this bike is not about speed, and I never thought about getting a Goldwing for the speed. It's just fun to ride. I think the unbelievable smoothness of this engine just makes it so soothing to ride. And if I had a windscreen, you could hear that awesome engine. But even now you can hear it, and I'm not even breaking the speed limit. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy about this particular old bike. And it pulls out of corners really easily as well. Love is like riding slow and really hearing that engine. Think about keeping the weight like down low. Back then, Honda even then realized that, yeah, that's an important thing to do. Keep the weight down low. You're gonna build a heavy bike, might as well keep it low. That's 25 miles an hour and this bike just sounds and rides so well. Man, it sounds so good when you get on the gas on this bike. Bike feels like it shouldn't be predictable in corners, but it is. And because of the way it makes torque throughout the power band, it's so easy to know the speed you need to be going. Whatever gear I'm in, by the way, it's got 5 gears, not 6. So it doesn't have cruise control, it doesn't have heated grips, it doesn't have traction control. It's just a very simple bike. But back in the day, because of the air suspension, that was a technological improvement over a standard bike. That's full throttle in 2nd gear. Because it's freezing out, you can break traction on it, but you don't need traction control on something like this.